Welcome to the podcast where mental health is at the core of what we focus on. We strive to develop people like you to maximize who you are and what you've been called to do by sharing tools and resources for better brain health. And now here's your host, Juan Garcia.
Hey, welcome to the podcast where we focus on mental health and peak performance. We've been discussing this topic of cognitive distortions, and in this episode, I want to highlight specific types of cognitive distortions, as well as thinking errors and the importance of identifying them before we get to the process of working through cognitive distortions, different ways that we can manage and handle what these thoughts do to us and how they affect us. I just feel that it's important that we identify some of these thoughts. Some individuals struggle with getting past this because they may not truly accept the fact that this is a thought process, or don't know what these thoughts are doing to their belief system and their behavior. And so I wanted to make an episode to focus on what these cognitive distortions look like and how they kind of show up in our thought process and in our lives. So again, cognitive distortions are irrational thoughts, which means that they're really not evidence-based. There may not be any truth to it, and they look different for different people, depending on how we're wired, depending on our temperament, depending on the situation that we're facing at any given time. And what I like to use in my practice, there's two approaches that I like to use. First, I like to start with the foundation of temperament therapy. And if you're not familiar with temperament therapy, I did a whole series on different temperaments. And the reason why it's important for me, because in order for you to be able to maximize the best therapeutic approach, it's helpful for me to know how you're wired and what are your innate needs, and why you may be doing the things that you're doing is directly connected to your wiring and how your needs are not being met, or expectations, so forth and so on. So that's important for me as a foundation. Then I use cognitive behavioral therapy, which is an amazing tool. Dr. Aaron Beck founded it many years ago, and it's been so helpful to so many individuals, including myself. So I like to use it, and I think it's very successful. And there's a model that's used, and it starts with the situation. Any of us dealing with life, we have situations that arise, and depending on how we respond to those situations, there goes the model or the cycle. We have the situation, we have a thought, how we feel about it. Then we have emotions that filter those thoughts, give it meaning, and then we have behavior. And when that cycle or that thought process is not handled in a healthy way, then we get all of these different issues that we deal with and face. And it all starts with how we process our thought pattern with the situation at hand, and filtering it with emotions is super important. So this model is very helpful as it relates to identifying cognitive distortions. Another thing that's very important to note is that part of our thought pattern is definitely related to different things that we may have, dealt with in life. And in the previous episode, I discussed a little bit about what that looks like, different reasons why we may have developed cognitive distortions. And so I recommend that you go ahead and check that out. So here we go. Let's go down a list of different types of cognitive distortions. And hopefully this will be helpful to you as it relates to identifying them, so that you can say, that's me. Let me make sure that I'm doing my due diligence to work things through in my thought process. So here we go. One of the most common cognitive distortions is what we call magnification or minimization. So it's the two extremes where we either magnify the situation to a degree that it's not necessary, or we minimize it as if it's not really important and it doesn't matter. It's important to note that cognitive distortions, we all kind of deal with them in different levels, but depending on how much we give them credit and don't handle them, they can be harmful. They can lead to depression. They can lead to anxiety. They can lead to even episodes of psychosis and mania and all of these different behaviors because they take up real estate in our brains. I like to remind individuals that the brain and the mind are separate, but they're inseparable. So if our thought process has some type of cognitive distortion like magnification or minimization, and we're constantly either blowing things up or putting things under the rug, if you will, then that's going to affect our behavior, and that's going to affect our relationship. That's going to affect everything that we do. And so it's important to identify that and make note of that because it can be harmful in time. So magnification and minimization is the exaggeration of both either this way where it's overrated or underrated as it relates to value. And we need to be mindful of that. There's also the cognitive distortion of catastrophizing. And this is where we see only the worst possible outcome of the situation. There's no positive aspect of what we're thinking could be or will be. We're catastrophizing. And this is a big one. People that are anxious or get panic attacks or anxiety attacks, they really have this type of cognitive distortion kind of driving the bus, if you will, of their life. It affects their emotion, and so that creates a hijack to the amygdala, which is the gland in the brain that is trying to get you to regulate your response to trauma. And if you're catastrophizing, that amygdala gland is overworking, and your vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in your brain as far as your central nervous system, is having to navigate all this as well. And so there's so much information that I want to share about that. I'll leave it at that just to give you kind of like a teaser, but you do need to understand that catastrophizing does work you up, and your physical body can only take so much. And so we need to get a handle of this cognitive distortion. Another cognitive distortion, as I look at my notes here, it's overgeneralization, making broad interpretations from a single or few events. Example, I felt awkward during my job interview. I am always so awkward. So that's something that seems simple and small, but with time and thinking it over and over again, it really bogs the mind down and it affects us and it can be harmful. Another cognitive distortion is magical thinking, the belief that acts will influence unrelated situations. For example, I am a good person. Bad things shouldn't happen to me. And so it creates this magical thinking or false expectations or unrealistic expectations. And this could be very damaging to your day-to-day life. Cognitive distortion that's called personalization. This is the belief that one is responsible for events outside of their own control. Like, my mom is always upset. She would be fine if I did more to help her. Now, this is a specific cognitive distortion that can develop codependency. And if you're not familiar with codependency, I also did a series on that topic. And this is so unhealthy. We need to identify these cognitive distortions. Another cognitive distortion, jumping to conclusions. Anybody guilty of that? Yes, amen. I certainly have been and am. And this is interpreting the meaning of a situation with little or no evidence. This is not healthy at all. And within that, we get into other cognitive distortions like mind reading or fortune telling. Mind reading is interpreting the thoughts and beliefs of others without adequate evidence. For example, you can say, they would not go on a date with me. They probably think I'm not attractive. Or fortune telling, the expectation that a situation will turn out badly without adequate evidence. This is very familiar, or similar rather, than magical thinking, but it is a little different because you're already saying this is what's going to happen specifically to the situation at hand. So these are important to identify as we move on. I just wanted to list them out so that we can talk about them, and then obviously how to navigate these thoughts and do better as far as our thought process. Another one is emotional reasoning. It's the assumption that emotions reflect the way things really are. I feel like a bad person, therefore I must be a bad friend. This is so huge because it's almost like what I like to consider a false belief. And if you've been following us for a while, you know that last year I wrote a book called I Said to Myself, False Beliefs That Won't Let Me Breathe. And I identify 7 false beliefs that I personally was subscribing to, and it was really a motivator as to why I would do the things that I did. And so one of the things was people pleasing. And so because I wanted to please everybody, it was based on this false belief that that's the way I had to do it in order to have value and worth. I needed to please everyone. So you see how it's important to identify these cognitive distortions, because they will drive your motivation behind what you do. And if those motivations are not pure, then you will get yourself in trouble, because then you don't have boundaries, you don't have healthy sense of self, and you will end up doing things that compromise your integrity or someone else's integrity or safety, so forth and so on. And this is important. You know, I like to analyze human behavior, because when we hear about individuals that do things that are just crazy, and that's the term that we use in society. In other words, we would never do something like that. Something behaviorally that is evil. We think that person is evil, that person is bad. I always like to go to the psychological blueprint of that person to think, what led to this person behaving this way? And I am a firm believer that a lot of it has to do with cognitive distortions that are not identified and dealt with. It has to start with a thought process that is connected to a belief system. We all subscribe to a belief system, and when we don't understand where those beliefs are coming from, or we just kind of go the way we're feeling, and because we feel some type of way, and then that's what drives us, that can get us in trouble. And we need to make sure that we're being mindful of all this. Another cognitive distortion is disqualifying the positive. This is when one might receive many compliments on any single piece of feedback, but they focus on the negative. 95% was positive, but they'll focus on that 5% that's negative. So this is very important to identify. A couple of more. One is should statements. The belief that things should be a certain way. I should always be friendly. I should always, make friends. I should always get a job that I apply for. Should statement. This is not healthy, because there's a difference between being optimist and being a realist. I am a natural optimist. I believe in the goodness of people. I believe in putting the work in and getting the rate of return for the work and the investment that you put in. But I'm also a realist. And so I don't allow my optimism to blur my reality. They work hand in hand. That there is no disconnect. There has to be a relationship between my optimism and my reality. You cannot separate those two, because then it becomes an issue. And so you fall under this cognitive distortion thinking should statements. And then last but certainly not least is the all or nothing thinking. This is the black and white type of thinking. Thinking in absolutes such as always, never, or every every, all these superlatives. I never do a good enough job on anything. And again, if you know your temperament, you'll know a lot of these cognitive distortions are pretty much expected because of the way we're wired. And so it's good to know your temperament, and then it's good to go through the process of cognitive behavioral therapy to kind of really hone in on identifying these thoughts that are pretty much running rampant in our minds. And, part of my training has been in brain health through the Amen University. Dr. Daniel Amen is one of the world's renowned psychiatrists of today's culture. He has done the most brain scans of individuals that have dealt with TBIs, or traumatic brain injuries, concussions from NFL players and athletes. So he's very well respected because of the research he has done and how he's been able to help individuals with extensive brain injuries. And part of our training, he uses the acronym ANTS to identify some of these cognitive distortions. And the acronym ANTS stands for automatic negative thoughts. And he likes to use the word ants because, ants can be that annoying, creepy, crawling type of animal or insect. And it gives you a nice visual of what these cognitive distortions can potentially do to us. They become these annoying, creepy, crawling thoughts that are automatic. And we want to make sure that we capture them so that they're not on automatic, that they know their place, that they know that they have to be subject to us. We're the ones in control, not the ants. And we need to kind of take over and let them know where they belong. And the more we do that, and I'll teach you that in our next episode, the more we will be in control of our thoughts, and we will identify these cognitive distortions. If this episode has been helpful to you, please share it, like it, help us get the word out that these are important things that people should be identifying so that they can live a healthier life. It's all about mental health. Remember that 80% of what you can do in life is between your ears. It's how mentally tough you are, which also indicates how mentally healthy you are. And then 20% is based on your natural talent or abilities. So there's a lot to do in the development of a healthy mindset. So stay tuned as I help you not only discover, but uncover the power that you have to navigate all of these things and be more successful. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully it's been helpful to you. Drop a comment and let us know how we can support you. And remember that you can always reach out and we can help you navigate all of these different things. And it'll be our pleasure to do so. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast. For more information, visit our website at juangarciaenterprises.com. Our host, Juan Garcia, is available for speaking, coaching, and one-on-one counseling. You can email us at info@juangarciaenterprises.com. Until next time, remember, we only have one mind, so mind yours.